listeners, and welcome to another episode of Current Events on Tap, a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project, where, like the drinks, the current events are on the house. And I am your host, Alex Kirsch, pragmatic progressive, U.S. Army veteran, truck driver, gamer, and streamer. If this is your first time on the show, please do not forget to hit like, share, comment, and subscribe. We are currently streaming live on YouTube, Twitch, and the X platform. The format of the show is simple. I bring one or more guests onto the show. We talk beer or beverage of choice and the current events of the week. Each person will discuss their beverage choice for this hour, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic. It does not matter. Then each person will cover two current events of their choosing. They give the current event, they give their assessment, then each person gets a chance to give their assessment, and then we discuss it. Now, debate may be possible, but rest assured, you are in a good faith zone, and you will get your chance to get your point across. The point of this space is for all of us to discuss the issue, what we think of it, and keep an open mind to what the other person has to say. And please remember to keep it within TOS. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome our guest this evening, Tyler, a.k.a. Average Debate Enjoyer. How you doing, Tyler? You're muted.
Doing well, thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt your intro.
I gotcha. So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and where they can find you.
Average Debate Enjoyer on YouTube and Twitter. I'm kind of new channel, working on a few things, buying some equipment, getting everything all set up. Should be up and going next week. I want to do an election series that explains what the candidates' policies actually are on specific issues without the hyperbole or the partisan attacks from the other side, and kind of give people a fair assessment of what they're expecting from both administrations if somebody wins in 2024. Otherwise, kind of a center, leftist center, liberal before everything, but a former Democrat, not really a fan of the Republicans either anymore, just kind of politically homeless, floating around, assessing everything case to case.
Gotcha. Now, what made you want to get into streaming, essentially?
Oh, I love political debate. That's really it. I don't have Patreon or anywhere to take money or anything like that. I don't care about any of that. I just like debating politics. It's fun. I've been annoying everybody in my real life for years, bringing up things they don't care about, so I figured I'd go to a realm of my peers and see if I'm more than just a big fish in a small pond.
Yep, yeah, completely fair. Yeah, you and I actually shared a panel last week. Was it last week? We talked about lobbying, and that was actually a fun panel. Really, really informative. It got a little lively, but that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it was fun, and much thanks to Wick once again for bringing us on to that panel. It was a lot of fun. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and discuss which alcoholic beverage I'm drinking this evening. Tonight I am drinking Garage Beer. That's pretty much all it is. It's just, it's a light beer, 95 calories. I don't know where this is made from out of. It's okay. It's not like my favorite kind of beer. It's just kind of a neutral taste, essentially. It's not horrible, though, but I am drinking it out of this beautiful mug that I bought at a Renaissance festival, not too far away from where I live right now. And I think it's made out of maple, I want to say, but it's beautifully done. I love drinking out of this thing as well. I have all different kind of drinking chalices and cups to drink out of. I go to the Renaissance festivals all the time because they are a lot of fun for me. So, Tyler, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you're drinking this evening?
Well, I can't have alcohol because of health issues and mostly medication related. It just doesn't jive well, so I'm having Celsius. It's no sugar energy drink that apparently helps you lose body fat. Ain't going nowhere though. Yeah, that's about it for me.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Yeah, but like I said, I don't begrudge people that don't drink. It's perfectly fine and acceptable. I just do it because I like talking beer. I like talking politics. I like talking the whole 9 yards. I mean, it's very chill. So, all right. Should we go ahead and just jump into the topics?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So the first topic. Earlier this week, Mexico held its presidential election, and for the first time in their nation's history, they have elected a woman as president, Claudia Sheinbaum. Now, social media lit up like a Christmas tree, with many wondering if Mexico is headed in the right direction or if it will still kind of be business as usual. Now, a little bit of background on President-elect Sheinbaum. Now, before she ran for president, she had a background in science with a PhD in energy engineering, and she was also the mayor of Mexico City. Now, from what I understand, people feel like her policies in Mexico City were just somewhat neutral. Crime rates initially when she first took over was a little high, but it's dropped dramatically somewhat. Mexico City is still one of the most dangerous cities in the world, of course, but that's not changing anytime soon. But I guess like the death per capita like dropped significantly while she was the mayor for the first for a couple years. But the first 52 months was really, really hard for them, so it kind of changed. But she dropped out in order to run for president, and apparently she won by a landslide. So when it comes down to some of her policies, she does believe that climate change is a problem across the world, and there's a drought currently in Mexico, and we have yet to see what kind of plans she has to implement. Now, certain businesses in this country, they like to outsource jobs to Mexico, and some of these jobs involve like painting, equipment, painting, like siding for houses and whatnot. Now, the water that's being utilized for that now has to be reallocated to take care of the populace. So that's going to kind of halt all future projects, especially for jobs that we outsource to Mexico because of this drought. So that's why the whole climate change kind of jives in there, because this is I firmly do believe climate change is an issue, but all the water is temporarily being cut short and it's been prioritized to the people of Mexico, which is fair. She has stated how she's going to work with the U.S. to stem the immigration problem. Now, Sheinbaum has stated that she will have the Biden administration send aid to kind of stem the tide of people entering the U.S. from Mexico, from South America kind of deal. And she basically wants to make Mexico a destination for the migrants. Now, there could be an abundances of problems with that, considering the amount of cartels that there are in Mexico. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. I mean, human trafficking is very, very profitable in Mexico. The drug trade is still going on. There's still a lot of corruption within government. So how they're going to house migrants come into the country, that's another issue. But that's something we can cover. Now, the other problem with Mexico is it's still the most dangerous country in the world for journalists. Now, in 2022 alone, there was attacks on journalists over every 13 hours. There's an attack on a journalist or a media outlet. That's why it's been declared one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists to go to. From 2000 to 2022, 153 journalists have been killed. Now, it may not seem like much, but still, for one country, that's a lot of people. It's more dangerous than Colombia, more dangerous than Afghanistan, more dangerous than Iran, Israel, places like this. Mexico is not in. It's in a war, but against cartels essentially. It's not like a war between factions, but journalism, it's dangerous to be a journalist down there. Now, Mexico is still considered a major trade partner, and with all the issues it has, it's still a popular destination for travelers from the United States. Now, the question is, can Sheinbaum make it safer and more efficient as a trade partner? So, Tyler, go ahead and give me your thoughts on this new president of Mexico.
Well, you summed up a lot of the things that I looked up before I was going to jump in here, that she has a pretty solid record as a mayor in terms of the murder rate. There is some people questioning if that might have been artificially pushed down a little more than it actually is, but the fact that it went down so drastically in Mexico City, it just reflects well upon her. I'm kind of interested to see if she can carry that over. My biggest concern with all this is how many mayoral candidates running against the cartel have been killed. I think it's 100 or a couple hundred mayoral candidates in the last 15 years or so just for running against the cartel. So the fact that she wasn't either shows maybe she's got somebody backing her that's powerful, keeping her safe. Maybe she's a little more compromised and won't get the necessary reforms done. It's really, time is going to tell. So there's a lot of interesting things to look forward to. In terms of climate change, again, it's something that needs to be addressed, but I feel like you're not going to get a more reliable trade partner. You're not going to get a better economy. You're not going to get a country that people want to go to and build the economy unless you focus on the crime first. And the climate change thing is notable. And I feel like she left her language vague enough to, if Trump wins in 2024, that administration's also going to be able to come in and work with her as well, because we also, as Trump doesn't also want people coming into the country. So making Mexico a valid destination, it would be a pretty good thing to do. I just think the Republicans want to go in with the army and take care of it that way, where I don't think Democrats really, the debates framed that as like a police state tactic. So it's two different ways on how to get there, but it does seem like at the end of the day, both parties do kind of want Mexico to be a more, absolutely, who doesn't want our southern border to be bordering somebody a little bit safer that's not making $15 billion a year on trafficking human beings to come over for sex and slavery. Absolutely. Who doesn't want that to get better? So,
absolutely. It's still the second largest criminal enterprise in the world. Drug trafficking is still the number one criminal enterprise in the world. There's no other way to look at it. My only concern is regardless of who's up, say for example, in a hypothetical situation that if Trump gets reelected, right, there are people that are screaming that, yes, we should go into Mexico. Do people not understand that that's not going to go over well? Because, The reason why I say that is because there's a lot that people don't understand about these cartels. They're not just going to roll over if the army comes in, because a lot of these guys are former Mexican army commandos. They left the army to get paid by the cartels. So these guys are well trained. And, as somebody that's a veteran, I can tell you from experience that, like, when you're fighting people that, are not just getting paid by money, but ideology, essentially, like, the cartels are very, very solid. These guys are very well organized. They're very well trained. I would say they're about on the same length as maybe the Taliban, evenly, by their organization structure. Now, granted, they may not, execute the same tactics, but they have that overwhelming fire superiority and whatnot. I mean, there's people that they're arms salesmen that will sell them top of the line equipment, because the black market is very, very prominent, especially in Mexico. Now, the drug trade, they're making a shit ton of money regarding that. So that's how they're funding themselves, because people are going to keep buying from there. I do worry about whoever's in office next, because Biden's not going to send us into war, because then his poll numbers are going to keep decreasing. Say, see, look, he's not the president of peace. Trump was, but Trump saying, "Oh yeah, we would invade Mexico." It's just it's absurd to think about.
That's it's the myth of MAGA versus the Trump truisms. Is Trump was never a president of peace. When he was running for office, he said on Fox News, "We're going to bomb the shit out of the Middle East." And then when he got into office, his first 2 years, he escalated drone strikes way past the Obama years in terms of what we were dropping on these countries. It's just that he started no new wars, and some libertarians like the way that one line sounds if you ignore the rest of the context. So that's why it's a myth. But Trump would actually. I think that I just don't. They're so rich and powerful. It's like you compare them to Hamas or the Taliban, which is pretty good comparison. But the Taliban's fighting an ideological battle where they're spending all the money that Iran gives them and all the money that they bring in. They're spending that on their cause. Whereas the cartel, they don't have that opposition. They're hoarding that money. They're building more power. They're getting more. It's the one thing that I feel like the Republicans were leaving out of their discussion. Is they don't care. They were saying if Mexico says no, we're still going to go in because this is a national security issue, and that's our closest ally. We cannot invade their country. It just doesn't. You can't do that. So
100%. Yeah, I kind of rolled over for a second, so I missed part of what you said. So
I'm sorry.
It's not your fault. Like I said, my internet does that sometimes, so it happens. So
I was just saying, they're so big and powerful. Mm-hmm. I don't see how military intervention, at least backing them like we do Ukraine and Israel, isn't a necessity. I just don't see how we can get away from a violent conflict here just because they're so powerful.
Absolutely. I've always found the best way to, most libertarians would love something like this is just decriminalize drug use. You could really take away some of their power base. You could just dry up their resources. That's one option. So, but when it comes down to these climate policies, you brought up an interesting point, the fact that climate policies, while it is very noble, crime is a big issue. Why do you think some of the crime is such a big issue in Mexico? I mean, do you have any theories about that, really?
It's the cartel's control again. Any candidate that seems to come out and stand up and say we're going to fight the cartel is hung in the streets. One guy, one mayor, a female mayor. She was one of the first mayors elected female in some place that looks like it's a Cotija, something like that. She was shot 20 times in the street recently because she was trying to move against the cartel. They have an iron grip, especially on places that aren't major cities. I don't see without a stronger force them being removed. And I hate to sound like I'm bashing cosmopolitanism because I'm kind of a cosmopolitan myself, but climate change is kind of a rich country's issue and problem to solve. And some of these developing countries just can't afford to worry. India, China, well, not so much China, India and Mexico probably aren't at a point financially to worry as much about climate change, even if it is impacting them, as the United States would be. So, I think that's a problem we should more worry about and try to help them with, let alone, and let them fix the fundamental problems of their country.
That sounds fair. And, the reason I was asking about that, because one of my top topics out there, and you can ask anybody that I've talked to, is infrastructure. If the infrastructure is bad, the opportunity goes out the window. So I feel at the same time, opportunity isn't really there, in some parts of Mexico. Now, in some of the resort towns, yes, the opportunity is going to be there. Why? Because you got a bunch of people from America, from the United States, you got people from Europe, flying into they're flying into like the really expensive parts of Mexico to go, and they're boosting the economy there. But then you've got other parts of Mexico where it is rampant, like it's with corruption, drug use. Because you brought up a very interesting point earlier about talking about how you've got some mayors and some politicians say, "Hey, we're going to take on the cartel," and next thing you know, they end up getting murked. So the people that actually survive are probably the ones that are in the pockets. Here's a good example: Pablo Escobar. That guy had all kinds of politicians and police officers and people within the government in his back pocket. And he was able to get away with it for so long because he was able to bribe these individuals. So there's no telling. And it's not just like Mexico where we've seen stuff like this. I mean, I saw it in Iraq. There was people that were corrupt police officers that were in the pockets of, militias, essentially. Or they were just corrupt because they would kind of be strong-arming or shaking people down for their protection, essentially, when you're supposed to just be a police officer. You're supposed to do it because that's your job. So who knows how deep the corruption might be. And for all we know, maybe she's going to, kick things off and she's going to clamp down on this stuff. But I just think it's one of those things that I think is easier said than done when it comes down to it, because we're talking about business, the largest, they have two of the largest markets, criminal enterprises in the world, locked in tight. They're not going to be giving that shit up easily. That would, especially with all the other politicians that they can fill the pockets with, essentially. That's my point, though.
Yeah. That if she really was as good at the murder rate as next year, coming to work with Mexico to get their crime down is still a possibility. She did give some she used some buzzwords that people on the left of the United States like, and obviously these people have a PR team. They know. Mm-hmm. Building and all that as well. I don't know, as a former military person, if that's something that's a sensitive topic to you, but I think what we did in Afghanistan after the war was over, the time that we were just staying there, is necessarily kind of a good thing, because the women in the country got to go to school. Their life expectancy went up by 4 years just in the time we were there. I feel like us doing the same thing to Mexico at their behest, it's a big part of it, really could improve their situation. So
it could. And a lot of people are really upset with how we left Afghanistan, but I just tell people there is no way you're going to leave a country after 20 years and it's going to look good, especially when you make a deal with the Taliban, who then just take over within a matter of days. But that was just going to be a disaster piece. But that's what I worry about too, because it's kind of like when you have a bunch of war hawks or chicken hawks that never served a day in the military, and they will say, well, maybe we should just go to the country and just liberate everybody. Okay, we have to understand that it's not that simple, because there are people that are not familiar with the American way of life. Their propagandists be like, my God, these Americans are gonna kind of come and kill you all, essentially. And then let's say, for example, a bombing campaign happens, the whole shock and awe happens, and next thing you know, their house gets destroyed, and you just basically radicalize people to fight against you. It's this is why I always bring up that war happens because of failed diplomacy. In a situation like this, especially against the cartels, I just don't know if there is a diplomatic solution that she can engage with the cartels on, or if she's eventually going to get in their pockets. I'm not going to speculate on that, but I'm just wondering, what is her next step? What if she gets elected and then they put a hit on her, essentially? Because I remember there was a video years ago of a guy, I guess he had an issue with one of the cartel members, and they wrote a letter saying, hey, after your concert you're dead, and he just kept on singing after that, and then sure enough, after the concert was over, he got killed. It's holy shit. It's a very dangerous situation, and it's nothing that people, I think more people need to be aware of how dangerous it is. The Border Patrol can tell us all about this. I got a friend that works in the Border Patrol, and he tells me all the time how dangerous these guys are. So I mean, I'm really kind of curious to see what she does and what kind of reforms she can bring in. But some people think it's just going to be business as usual.
It really, with nation building too, it really depends on the nation, because somehow we got certain nations on board and now they're great allies: Germany, Japan, South Korea, things like that. And then other ones, it was just a failed disaster. I don't know if it was too much for-profit nation building going on, because there was a lot of instantiated companies that made a ton of money off of the failure in Iraq. So
sure,
I don't, I don't know enough about the ins and outs to tell you why certain nation-building attempts failed and different, but I feel like Mexico's so similar, close to us culturally, and on the border of us. I feel like it would work a bit better to maybe not morph them into mini United States, but help them come along with their corruption problem.
Froze up for a second, so.
I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, she could be blowing smoke up her ass. She could be great. Time's gonna tell.
Well, and before we move on to the next topic, essentially, so when I look at this, right, one of the reasons why it went so poorly as far as Iraq is concerned is because we tried to create a fighting force too quickly. Because the first military force that was put into effect after the fall of Baghdad, after the fall of Iraq and whatnot, was the ICDC, the Iraq Civilian Defense Corps. Their training was, guess how long their training was before they were sent back out into the fight?
Wasn't it 6 weeks, I think?
2 weeks.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was at the training facility where these guys were trained at, and it was very basic. But they were basically did 2 weeks of training, and then they went out in sector with soldiers. That's exactly how it went. So I think these are all lessons that the United States has learned that we could possibly learn from, or because a lot of doctrine has been built off this to make things better. And that's why they built academies like the Military Advisor Training Academy to actually work with coalition forces and work with new forces, because it's still in effect right now, and it's actually something that's really good. They're called SFABs now, which it could be better because you're supposed to stay out of conflict. You're just supposed to train and advise to make them a more efficient fighting force. They tried it in Afghanistan because it was just so rampant with corruption. It's not going to work that way. So there's a lot that people, military advisors are great to have. We've had them since Vietnam. They work when the units function, they are fantastic. But when there's disorder, corruption, when people are not focusing on the big picture right there, it becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of want to know the nuances of it all. Why sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think it's just nation to nation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But that's interesting.
Yeah, well, my last deployment to Iraq, we trained 3 different units. We trained police departments, 2 or 3 different police departments. We trained different army units, and then we trained a unit called the ERU. The ERU was led by a guy who was a former Republican Guard commander, and he actually had standards, and he actually held his guys to those standards. He was very old school. Now, some of the police officers were very corrupt, so when you create a toxic environment like that, it trickles down, because then nobody wants to kind of work and doesn't want to make it work. The ERU, however, they actually gave a shit. They would be out in sector with us. They would build rapport with the people, and it would actually gain the trust of the populace. And that's what's really important, is doing things like that to gain the trust of the populace will make leaps and bounds and make a huge difference, essentially. But it's a topic I could probably say for another time. But that's kind of how it breaks down. It's if the chain of command, if the command structure is crooked and corrupt, you can bet your bottom dollar that it just trickles down, and it only gets worse the lower down, because there's no oversight, there's no standards being upheld, and it's just a shit show. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that all interesting, because again, that's kind of a policy I like. I just don't know enough. Foreign politics is probably my weakest area. So
that's fair. So, all right, you want to go ahead and start with your first topic?
Yeah, I was looking at. I threw 2 at you, the Israel hostage crisis thing that happened today that I was reading about, and then the Trump trial. That was just in the news last week. I don't know if you've discussed it with anybody yet.
I didn't do a show last week, so hit me. So
all right, well, I think the Trump trial, I listened to, what's their names? It's 3 lawyers. I think it's a New York Times podcast, Sisters-in-Law. Mm-hmm. So I listened to their analysis of it. Then I listened to Andrew McCarthy at National Review. I tried to get the left-wing, right-wing approach. And then I tried to look up, even CNN was saying that the willfulness standard of the secondary crime that Trump was charged with was not proven in court prior to the jury's ruling that he was guilty. I don't know. It just middle. It seems like the people making the argument that this is kind of a bastardization of justice with the legal people that don't like Trump at all, that talked poorly about him his entire 4 years, that are coming out to his defense on this issue. And I kind of feel like that speaks volumes. Legal minds, famous people and things like that. I don't know. I don't think it's a good thing for his campaign. I'm not saying like you'll see like people saying, oh, they just gave Trump the election. No, it's not. Clearly the polls say this is going to hurt him, especially with independents who he needs to win. But I don't like it from a justice system perspective, because it seems like, as Bill Kristol put it in his New York Times op-ed, it seems like they got the right verdict for the wrong crime.
That's fair. I've done a little bit of research on this as well. Out of all the cases that Trump has to worry about, this was definitely the weakest one out of all of them. But the fact of the matter is that, like, people wondering, oh, what kind of dangerous precedents is it going to set? Does this mean that, like, anybody can go get put on trial for anything? I'm like, yeah, why not, actually? I mean, is it something that, you know, he's going to go to jail for? No. He's not going to see the inside of a jail cell for this. Like, I mean, for crying out loud, the guy was held in contempt multiple times. He violated gag orders like 10 times, essentially, and he just got fined for it. Other people, like average Joes like you and me, we'd get fucking crushed. Absolutely. But it's because this is such a dangerous case, essentially. But I look at it like this. Is it still kind of a weak case? Yes. But I also look at it like this. Trump complained about the fact that certain witnesses that the prosecution didn't bring on. Okay, why didn't the defense bring them on? The defense had every opportunity to bring people to testify on behalf of the defense, essentially, and they didn't do that. The prosecution was able to build a convincing enough case where people, 12 jurors, average people, some that were even on True Social, you know, still found, you know, determined guilty. Now, Trump said that the whole thing was rigged, but he says everything is rigged if he doesn't win, right? But then I look at it like this. Had he won like 2 or 3 cases, he'd say, see, look, I won this cases right here, but because he didn't win a single one, he finally got a popular vote, though, in his favor. But it didn't go in his favor, that is. But it's just, this case right here, it's still the weakest one, but the fact of the matter is, it still, like, shows that he is found guilty of, you know, falsification of business records. And, because I remember, John Edwards, you remember him? He did the exact same thing, and it forced him to drop out of the campaign. And people are like, oh my God, this is horrible. What a corrupt individual. But people are trying to draw a correlation between his case, or between Trump's case, and Bill Clinton, which is not the same. What you got?
I think it was, what's his name? John Edwards did something more similar to what Hillary Clinton did in 2016, which was she wrote off the Steele dossier, I think, as a campaign contribution when it was Oppo research, and the FEC slapped her with a fine, and that was the end of it. So the problem with the legal theory is that we know Trump falsified documents, which is a 2-year statute of limitation misdemeanor in New York State. The reason why he was able to bring this to trial 5 years later is because they upgraded it to a felony based off a legal theory that all they had to do was prove willfulness that Trump committed a secondary crime. And the 3 secondary crimes offered by Bragg were New York State campaign election laws, federal campaign election laws, and the third one would be tax evasion. Now, when Merchant was giving the jury instructions, he never explained what willfulness was in terms of like what a legal standard of willful act is, and that's why CNN was saying that chances are he actually didn't willfully try to commit any of these 3 secondary crimes. Also, Merchant was leaving out certain information. Like, Trump wanted to testify on behalf of the Stormy Daniels stuff to give his perspective, but Merchant said that if he testified, it would bring in other information that was being left out of the trial that would hurt Trump. And there was no narrow scope he would be allowed to testify just based off of what was already said in the trial. So yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't finish the first point. So yeah, there were 3 different crimes. When Merchant was giving the jury instructions, he said, if 4 of you agree with it, was a 4-4-4 rule, which is, I guess, only ever been used in one other case ever in New York legal history. But if 4 of you agree that this is the second crime, 4 of you agree that this is the second crime, and 4 of you agree that this is the second crime, you don't even have to agree the same crime was committed. We'll still consider that a unanimous vote. And that, to me, kind of stuck out as like a sore thumb, and it kind of validates the arguments that something a little fishy was going on here with the verdict. I just don't know enough about legally to contradict any of the legal experts that have said any of this to me. Like, one side says it's great, one side says it looks really fishy and it's going to get overturned on appeal. I don't know enough to say who's right and wrong.
Yeah, probably the channel that described it the best was the channel Legal Eagle. They actually did a real deep dive into it. Half the time I couldn't understand it because, like, And, not trying to change the subject too much, but this is why, like, when I try to read, like, a bill, I can't understand what half of it fucking says. Because there's so much legal and medical jargon in there. It would be like me trying to write a bill with military jargon. No one's going to understand it, really. This is why I say, when you write a bill, it needs to be understood at a 10th grade level, so I don't have to look up every single definition for everything that comes up here. It drives me nuts. But like, Legal Eagle does a really good job of kind of breaking it down, like what he was actually charged with, what the prosecution was able to determine, essentially. But it's just, and like the thing is that it might seem irregular, but at the same time, this is the first time we've ever seen a president that's ever been indicted for this many crimes, a former president, and he's the first one that's ever been found guilty and is now essentially convicted. Essentially, they say he's not really a convicted felon yet because the sentencing hasn't happened yet, but he's been convicted of crimes. And people say, "Well, this was an irregular trial." Well, yeah, it was an irregular trial, and I just think that if this being one of the weakest cases that you think, and they were still able to find some level of guilt, he's got a long road ahead of him, essentially. The classified documents has been permanently suspended, definitely suspended for the time being. But he's still got other cases to worry about.
The judge in Florida right now is currently looking over to see. I don't think either of the Jack Smith cases are going to happen before the election. And then the Fannie Willis case right now is currently suspended while a judge reviews the evidence and decides whether or not she gets removed from the case for her actions with her beau.
Mm-hmm.
Her boo. Yeah, so
yep.
Right now all of those are kind of put on hold. It seems like this might be the only one that could go through before the election happens, which that's the only scope that I think about because I like electoral politics. I love polls. I look at new polls every single day. I just like looking at data. I look at perception gap studies and things like that. I like seeing how people think and the dance that both sides do to play politics and manipulate what people are. I think Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell are both fantastic at their job, and I love watching both of them work. Chuck Schumer and Mike Johnson, not so good. They have their moments, but I just love the game of politics. So
sure, absolutely. I think with Jack Smith, I did you watch the earlier this week? Did you watch when they actually had Merrick Garland on the stand testifying before Congress?
I watched the first one when Jim Jordan called Merrick Garland up about the Hunter Biden stuff. It was a complete waste of 6 hours of my life. So no, I had no interest in watching them pull him up again. It's just partisan hackery when they do that shit.
Well, it was interesting because, they asked him about that whole Jack Smith being brought in, and Merrick Garland actually had a good reason. It's because he was not a political appointee, and he actually didn't associate with any party. He was very independent. It would have looked worse if he actually brought in, somebody that was a political appointee, whether it was on the right or on the left. That would have really drawn a lot of skepticism. And he actually explained the exceptions, and I can't remember what all it was because I'm listening to it at the time, but the video was buffering because I was driving through really, really rough parts, with really bad reception. But he was actually able to explain the precedents of bringing Jack Smith into this, and the reason why I think it's important for us to recognize these cases because if Fannie Willis goes, someone else is just going to take her place. I think I don't know if that's how it goes, but the fact of the matter is that there had to have been a great deal of evidence to bring these all to trial. And, if Jack Smith gets replaced, he gets replaced. But the question is who takes his place, essentially. But I just think what's so important about these cases is that they have to be right. And if Fannie Willis basically gets herself thrown off because she did something shady, that's on the fault of the people that hired her and appointed her because they didn't do their due diligence. And it's also her fault if she brought this on because this is very high profile. You've got to be accurate. You've got to be right for a case like this. You can't let this thing fall to the wayside, regardless of what your political affiliation is. If you are going, it would be kind of like you're going after the biggest criminal in the history of the world. Let's say, for example, you're going after the leader of a cartel, right? And you've got all this evidence, but the second they find some dirt on you and it gets the case thrown out, you done fucked up. You done fucked up, Ron. I mean, that's why it's so important that you have to be right in these cases.
Is the person that replaces Fannie Willis though gonna double down on the RICO charges, especially if they're a Republican appointee. That might be something to consider. Is like who gets to put in Fannie Willis's replacement, and if it's the judge that removed her, then I don't see them going forward with a RICO case about election interference. RICO was there for drug cartels and things like that. Again, I keep deferring to Andrew McCarthy. He's the guy at National Review. He's a former federal prosecutor. He's the guy that he went after the Iron Sheik and prosecuted him and such. So he's a pretty solid legal mind. He says this is not the actual intent of RICO. And on top of that, a judge in Georgia threw out several other of her charges already. Right now, the Jack Smith and a bunch of cases against the January 6 rioters, as well as how they got 3 of the obstruction charges against Trump in the D.C. case, is being reviewed right now by the Supreme Court. They could potentially throw out all 3 of those obstruction charges against Trump and only leave Jack Smith in the D.C. case with 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud, and that's it. And that would be like the smallest of the 3 crimes. I feel like if they were smarter in Georgia, they just would have went for the obstruction, in Florida, I mean, they would have went for the obstruction of him obstructing the federal investigators and just got him a nice federal slap on the wrist with that, because all the classified information and shit they got to go through is going to slow that shit down. I don't think you're going to see in 2024, maybe not even 2025, that Florida case go to trial. It's going to take years to get through all the classified info.
Oh,
so,
sure.
yeah. And the point of timing it out was to make Trump look bad before the election. Apparently that's the allegation. So if that's the case, and this is the only thing that goes through for Trump, and it doesn't look like it's moving the polls much. I've been watching the polls pretty close. I want to wait about another week before I make a final determination. But right now it looks like Trump only lost 1 point in aggregate from the election from the trial. So
Sure. And people contribute a lot to his campaign. I definitely believe in that, but I think it's just because it's kind of hard to explain. I can't explain human behavior regarding that, so it's just it's kind of ridiculous in my opinion. But that's just my personal opinion. But the reason why I look at the confidential, the classified documents is such a serious matter is because people like to draw whataboutisms, saying, "Oh well, Joe Biden had documents, yeah, but he cooperated." Mike Pence cooperated. Donald Trump did not. That's the big difference. And this is what we have got to focus on. This is the important part. Trump says that, hey, I could have these documents whenever I wanted to. No, he couldn't. Once you are no longer president of the United States, you're supposed to surrender all these documents. But it's just because he doesn't understand procedure. He doesn't understand these things. And that's the thing people need to know about Trump, is that he doesn't read. It's what people tell him, and then if they just go along with what he says, then yeah, he's going to roll with it. But when it comes down to the cases like in Georgia or all these election interference cases, there's people that are going to roll on him. Sidney Powell has already agreed she's going to testify against him in this case. Jenna Ellis is going to testify against him in these cases. That's going to be really, really hard for him to go back against, because these were 2 of his biggest cheerleaders in proving that the election was stolen. And even they came out and said, yep, the election was not stolen. And you can't use the offense, oh, well, I thought the election was stolen. Trump knows the election was not stolen, and I think that if you get him on the stand to testify on his own behalf, he would get shredded by the prosecution. That's my personal opinion, because the guy can't keep his mouth shut.
That's probably why he's never going to testify. But at the same time, it's a really, really, really hard thing to prove, to say that Trump knew that he lost. I think you have enough character witnesses and people around him to testify. There's the what's his name? The head editor for the National Review. He's a neocon. He's not even a big Trump supporter. I don't even think he voted for him in 2016, 2020. When he said Trump legitimately lost the election, Trump called this guy personally and yelled at him for an hour on the phone, just one-on-one conversation about how he didn't actually lost and how it was rigged. And there was literally nothing for Trump to gain from this. He just called a media personality that he knew on his side of the aisle and yelled at him because the guy didn't believe that the election was stolen. So, in my mind, there's enough viable evidence to put together to say that you can't prove that Trump knew that he lost. There's enough circumstantial evidence around his actions and the people around him. You could build a good rapport to at least cast reasonable doubt onto that specific charge. So I just don't think it's something they'll ever get approved in court, which is kind of why he really wasn't charged with anything like that. It was the DC case, which is supposed to be against potential insurrection, didn't charge anything insurrection wise, didn't charge anything in terms of inciting the riot wise. It didn't link him to the violence in any way. They gave him 3 obstructions and 1 fraud or conspiracy to commit fraud, and that's it. Like, it's just a weird set of charges based on what they're angry about. I don't know.
I think it's probably they probably were more confident with the fact that they could actually prove these other cases. It's kind of like what's a good example? When George Zimmerman, for example, they tried to go after him for murder. It's really, really, really hard to prove intent of murder because, like, what's the motive for murder? Having criminal intent, essentially, to commit murder. But they couldn't prove that in court. But I think they kind of overstretched their hand. So the reason why these might be like really small, interesting charges, I think it's because they are the most confident that they can prove these in court. That's kind of like, it seems a little bit irregular. But again, if people say, oh, we can just go tit for tat, that means we can go after any elected official. I'm like, okay, go for it. I'm all for it. Nobody's above the law, right? Let's fucking go.
Yeah, same. Like, if there is something, if there's a bit of smoke with the Hunter Biden stuff, if there's actually the fire Republicans are saying there is, fucking slap an arrest warrant on him. Apparently they're going to go after him for perjury, even though the investigation's still ongoing into Hunter Biden. Mm-hmm. They're going to throw out the perjury warrants now because they feel like that's obstructing their investigation to have somebody directly lie to them and go unpunished. So they said everything else is waiting for the end of the investigation.
When people ask me, oh, well, what about Hunter Biden? I'm like, who gives a shit about Hunter Biden? I don't give a shit about that guy. Oh, great. I guess I won't be voting for Hunter Biden this election, I guess. It just... I don't really give a shit about the guy, honestly. And, people are like, oh, Joe Biden's going to pardon him. He's already said he's not going to pardon his son. And people are like, oh, I don't believe him. Okay. I mean, that's not for me to tell you what you should or should not believe, essentially. I mean, I don't care about Hunter Biden. If he's found guilty and if he goes to prison, then he made his bed. He needs to lie in it now. I mean, there is no other way to look at it. I mean, I firmly believe that nobody should be above the law. But if people want to go to this whole tit for tat, go for it. If this means more elected officials have to face the music or former elected officials have to face the music, I am all for it. Go for it. Because then people might actually start putting a little bit more faith in the justice system actually working.
Yeah, it sucks for Trump supporters that it started with Trump, but if it doesn't end with Trump and moves to every person that commits a crime while in office, absolutely. There's a slush fund that Congress uses to cover up, to pay for NDAs for sexual assault by Congress members on their staff, and they use taxpayer money to pay NDAs so that these people can sexually assault their staff members and go unpunished. That's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of things I want to see ended. And it's like, what's his name? Oh, he was in Detroit. He's a big name in Detroit. His son took his seat when he died. He had multiple, I can't remember his name right now. Oh, I'm blanking. He was in the House. Old black man. I can't remember his name.
I don't know.
But he had like 5 or 6 cases against him, I thought, and like they were using taxpayer money to cover up sexual assault by Congress members. It's just crazy, and I'd love to see things like that end and people actually be held accountable for their actions. Get out of here.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm all for, like, if you really want to drain the swamp, that's how you fucking do it. That's how you do it. That's how you really drain the swamp. It's like you put people to account and you hold them accountable for crimes they might have committed. I mean, look, like, what's his face? Anthony Weiner, right? He got voted out of office, or he basically got forced to resign for his, for what the shit he was doing. And he eventually went to prison for a number of other things. And I was glad to see that. I was glad to see him go to prison. And I thought he was a hard charger. I thought he was okay back in the day, but then I found out, oh, this dude's he's kind of a fucking deviant. He's kind of a weirdo. But I was glad to see that he was held to account. It should be that way for everybody. But there seems to be like a huge double standard because, like, there was one guy, John Vitter, I think his name was. He was from Louisiana, and he had multiple sexual affairs with escort called the Lady of the Madame of D.C. And he lied initially, and he was still married at the time. And the Republicans said, "Oh yeah, we believe him." But then he came out and was like, I did it. I was wrong. I'm all fucked up like a football bat." But you know what they gave him? They gave him a standing ovation. I was like, "That's a little fucked up, dude. I'm sorry. That's, if you're gonna screw up. I mean, if you're gonna fuck around and find out, if you're gonna get held to account, then by all means you need to get, like George Santos. I'm glad he got the boot out of Congress. That dude was a nightmare. But it's just like, I wish I saw more of that because these people don't deserve to be in positions of power if you're corrupt like that.
Yeah. or even just stupid. But I mean, I guess that's subjective because I hear people call people stupid for just not agreeing with their politics all the time.
Oh, sure.
So I guess that's a bad standard. But no, yeah, absolutely. If people need to be removed much more often, I do think that some of it's overblown. There was something with what's her name, Kelly Loeffler, I think her name was, in Georgia.
Yeah.
She had stocks, and she had a third party dealing with her stocks. She had there was no proof she had any communication with this third party. The third party sold some stocks that there was a policy she voted on like 2 days after, and the stocks were sold, and there was no actual proof that she coordinated with this third party broker that was taking care of her portfolio. But people went after her anyways. I think that if you actually have that separation there, it's a good thing, because I don't want to disincentivize people for running for office by telling them they can't have a successful life. You know, like I want them to be able to trade stocks. It just has to be done in that responsible way. And I feel like if we took that mentality and rolled it over, we could correct a lot of the things we just talked about as well.
I do think there needs to be some checks and balances. There's supposed to be checks and balances within Congress and the Senate, but the only one that there is no checks and balances, and Josiah from Pondering Politics and I discussed this, the only place that has no checks and balances is the Supreme Court. Like, that... Oh my God, Clarence Thomas, holy shit. That, you want to talk about a conflict of interest. That dude is rampant with it, but I didn't want to get too far off topic. Was there anything else you want to cover as far as the Trump trial, or were you pretty much solid with it?
No, that was it. All I got is the Israel stuff that happened earlier, and I'm just going to riff about Israel, but you do your thing.
Gotcha. All right, so my next topic is Alex Jones, the famous conspiracy theorist who sells outrageous, all-natural bone broth, muscle enhancers, and other assorted goodies, has agreed to liquidate assets to pay the $1.2 billion he owes to the families of Sandy Hook, when he claimed it was a false flag operation, that their children were still alive, and his followers even took the time to harass those families, which was absolutely horrendous. Like, people would actually drive by their houses, call them, and say, hey, your children are actually alive, your children aren't dead, which is absolutely abhorrent, disgusting behavior. He was taken to court, like you do, and he's been ordered to pay $1.2 billion to the families who he even caused further harm to. Now, many of the right think this is an infringement on speech, but it isn't. Now, this is quoted from NBC News. Christopher Mate, or however you pronounce it, a lawyer for the Sandy Hook families, said their fight is far from over. Alex Jones has hurt so many people, Mate said in a statement. The Connecticut families have fought for years to hold him responsible, no matter the cost, and at great personal peril. Their steadfast focus on meaningful accountability and not just money is what has now brought him to the brink of justice in the way it matters most. Now, people are going to say, oh, this is an infringement on rights. No, this is defamation. This is like absolute, like what the pain and suffering he caused on this family. There's no monetary value you could put on that, but you got to hit a guy like that where it hurts, essentially. Because here's a great example about like taking somebody to court, especially when they defame your character that results in you getting harassed. Jesse Ventura is a great example. Chris Kyle wrote a book, in his book American Sniper, how a guy named Scruffface told him that SEALs deserve to lose a few in Iraq. Never happened, right? And he went on the Opie and Anthony show, and people called in and said, hey, is that Jesse Ventura you're talking about? It's like, yep, it sure is. And he just rolled with it from then on. Now, I studied that story in great detail. There was no proof, and when Jesse Ventura took him to court, but of course, unfortunately, he died, he then sued the estate. When he went to court, nobody could prove that this ever took place, but he still has been disassociated with the Navy SEAL community. The guy served as a UDT veteran, but he's no longer welcome at SEAL graduations. He's no longer a part of the SEAL community. This caused a great deal of harm upon himself. Now, you can't put a financial price tag on that, but the thing is, he was able to clear his name, even though some people feel he did more damage than he actually, yeah, somebody wants to be on the stream. But some people feel like he ruined his reputation more. I disagree, though, because the most important thing is to clear your name. And that's exactly what these Sandy Hook families did, because eventually Alex Jones said, yeah, what I did was wrong, and I shouldn't have done that, and, but of course he found himself being combative with the judge as well. But the fact of the matter is like, this is a big deal. Now, he's complaining about how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay my child support? How am I going to do? Well, that's not my fucking problem, okay? Maybe you shouldn't have done this. Maybe you shouldn't have created these wild conspiracy theories for clicks and made these people go out and like harass these families who already lost everything they could have, they lost their entire world that fucking day. So go ahead, Tyler. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think that there are a couple, I've heard the detractor arguments. There are a couple solid points in there about how the money amount might be a little bit ridiculous versus Alex Jones's actual net worth and whatnot. But other than that, like, none of those people are arguing that what he said wasn't wrong, defamation, blah, blah, blah. There's a few people out there arguing this is an infringement of free speech. And if you really want to be technical, depending on how you define free speech, it is. This is an infringement on free speech that we decided is a necessary one because you're using your speech to violate somebody else's rights and their pursuit of happiness by lying about them. And I think going on TV and lying about citizens should be illegal. And I'm glad that it is in this case. At least civilly, they were able to get some sort of financial compensation for it. The whole time I watch a lot of trials. I watched the whole Derek, or what's his name? The guy from the Waukesha Driver. Darrell Brooks. I love that trial. I've watched it twice probably. It's
Really?
just so entertaining. It's so entertaining. He's so good. But Alex Jones, I watched him testify, and all he was doing was there are 1,000 memes came out of it. He made a joke, I think, about the Clintons at one point. He did not take that shit seriously. He did not go in there saying, look, I'm 100% apologetic. I'm so sorry. I've already recanted this years ago. I didn't want to hurt anybody. Any money I made out of this, if you guys can prove I made any money, I'll donate it to these families right now. I am so sorry. And they probably would have been much more lenient on him than they were. He went in there combative. He went in there. There was another thing he said. I guess he never talked about some FBI agent or anything, and the FBI agent was suing him and got $18 billion or something like that. He's like, I never even mentioned the guy's name. But, like, he alluded to it. His fans figured it out. They called into his show. They said the guy's name on the show. Alex Jones didn't confirm or deny it, and then continued to bash the guy as the code name he was using. So it was, he was doxxed on his show. So I just feel like a lot of this is deserved, and this is kind of what you get for going online and spreading lies for 15 years. Eventually, you got your comeuppance. Again, I just kind of maybe disagree with the exact amount that they got. But yeah, there's really, how do you put a price tag on that? Every one of those people lost their kids, and then they have to spend the next 10 years being harassed by crazy people that believed in internet conspiracy theorists. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't like it. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I'm kind of glad.
Those children should have graduated this year too. That's the crazy part. Like, they should have graduated this year. And that's what's really sad. It just, and when it comes down to the topic, it's like, at what point does that mean you can just take anybody to court to sue them? Yeah, you actually can. Now the question is, does the case have merit? Can it be proven in a court of law? And for something like this, yeah, it's really, really hard to do something like this. But the thing is, though, is that like you said it, for all these years, these families have tried to do their part to make sure that this never ever happens again, because they lost everything that day. And then to have their pain further inflicted upon them by being accused of, oh, your children are child actors. And I remember last week tonight with John Oliver, it says, I'm pretty sure, Susie May would have just said, oh, yeah, my daughter has got a great role. She could have gone for the Tricks commercial, but she's got a great role where she's going to play a corpse, essentially. Now, people say, oh, well, there's a lot of shady stuff going on over there. Like, who remembers the medical examiner? The guy was a bit off kilter. Do you remember that guy?
I didn't really pay that deep of the attention to the details.
He was a little off, but I think it's just because, he was mentally drained at that point. So that's why he just seemed a little bit off. I mean, trauma can really bring out interesting reactions to some people. But, kind of go back to Alex Jones. Alex Jones is known to be a provocateur. He's known for, saying things that aren't necessarily true. He's known to get people riled up. But I think it's because he's very influential and very charismatic. People are very influenced by him. And it's just like, you've got people that already have a distrust of the United States government, and he just feeds and he preys on that, Because, I used to watch his show pretty frequently, and I wouldn't say I believed in him, but it's just I saw what he was talking about, and at times it made me think. But then I realized half the time, I don't even know if he believes half this shit. I just know he just knows how to market it. He knows, it's kind of like Trump is great at marketing too. He knows how to market his name. And Alex Jones knows how to market controversy. He knows how to get people talking about issues that aren't even really that big of a fucking deal. I mean, he brings people on that he says, oh, this guy's an expert in this field. Come to find out, the guy has no credentials whatsoever, but he just uses that title, and people automatically believe, oh, Alex Jones would never lie to me, right? It's just, The guy's just out there, but people buy into his shit. I mean, is this like the media nowadays? We're like, because we all know that the media sells. Like, they don't necessarily sell what's accurate. They sell what sizzles. They sell the story. It doesn't have to be accurate. Like, this brewing company, right, would be behind, like, somebody could go on tomorrow and say that this brewing company right here was behind a terrorist plot, essentially, which they aren't. But, you know, people will push that out there, and before it's accurate, boom, they're going to get it out there, because we have got to get the story out here, because if nobody else if they get out here before us, we're not going to get the clicks, we're not going to get the market, we're not going to get the share. It's fucking insanity.
It is, and it's led to a lot of inaccuracies in news that are dropping people's trust in it. As far as Alex Jones goes, like, shit. Oh, I had a great point. I lost it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, damn it. No, you're good. It's. I had it when I started talking. Damn it. No, like, he made his own bed, essentially. It's kind of like he's laying in it now. Oh, yeah. So you were saying you think that he doesn't believe a lot of what he says. I disagree. I feel like if this was planned, there's so many ways he could have worded what he said differently, or added a few words like allegedly and maybe, and we don't, like, he could have, if he planned it out, he would have been a lot more careful to not actually accuse people of the things he did in the way he did, because he could have used those words. Like, again, he could have thrown allegedly in with every statement he made, and I think he would have pretty much been off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't do that ever. So, like, I think he really believes what he's saying, and it's, even if you believe what you're saying, if it causes harm to somebody, it's still, I'm sure communists believe everything they say as well.
Yeah. That's... Boy, that topic, it's just like, every time I have an argument with somebody about communism, it's just like, that's not real communism. Like, all right, well, we'll talk about that later, though. So it's just,
it's kind of, I noticed the same thing with the libertarians. It's such a small, fractured movement of all these little different mini groups that think that their way is the only right way, and they gatekeep everyone that disagrees with them on the small things. Yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah, there's a lot that kind of comes down to it. It's like, no, that's not real libertarianism. Oh, no, that's not real progressive. Oh, no, that's not real liberalism. That drives me nuts, too. That's just... Nothing gets under my skin more than people tell me, oh, you're not a real Democrat. Why? Oh, because you're critical of Nancy Pelosi. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can't be critical of Nancy Pelosi? I mean, it's just like, nothing alienates me more than that. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off topic, though. But
no, you're good. I mean, I broke away from the Democratic Party fully because I disagree with them on so many topics. Mm-hmm. I'd say, like, 45% of things I believe politically the Democrats don't stand for. Mm-hmm. So I can't be a Democrat unless I side with it maybe 75% of the time. So
that's fair.
I still agree with them. I say slightly majorly in terms of my political philosophy, but there's a lot of things Republicans do that I think are right, and I don't care if the purity testers say you side with the Republicans on one thing and you're right wing by default. I don't care. I just kind of try to figure out what's best for me.
No, I get that. Charles, I was a centrist for many years, but now I'm a staunch Democrat. I will be a staunch Democrat more than likely for the rest of my life, because, like, even though there are some things I disagree with, I just feel like I'm more aligned with their points of view. So, but anyway, like, when it comes to Alex Jones, going back to him though, it's just, I think, like, he's very much the TV personality. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not like, I don't think, like, the way he is like an act, really, because according to his ex-wife, he's like that all the time. He's very unhinged. And it's funny because, like, when I look at some of his products, like, he had a before and after picture. It looked exactly the fucking same. Like, there was, like, no change whatsoever. So I don't know exactly what he was trying to sell. But, like, it's just, sometimes I think, like, I wonder sometimes if it's just a charade of some sort, if this is, like, what he's doing, if a facade or, an act. But there are times, like, I wonder... And that's why I wonder if he actually believes this shit, or if he's just that fucking unhinged half the time. Like, just like that. I just don't know, because I see him, like, screaming, just like, it's like, what the fuck is this guy? This guy is on something, but people watch that shit, though.
The thing is, there's a subject I don't want to say because it gets a lot of people in trouble when I say I bring skepticism toward it, but I feel like there's a group, a social movement of mostly leftists, but it's bleeding into the main democratic liberalism, that just, when I hear people talk about it, it's like, you really believe that? Are you just LARPing because it's the thing that the party line is doing? Like, you really believe this? I don't want to say what it is, though.
Yeah, you can mess me offline about it, and we'll talk about it then. So.
Yeah. It's just, I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't care. I'm very open about my disagreement with that particular movement.
I gotcha. So, all
But
right. Want to go on your last topic?
yeah, so there was there was a hostage rescue mission that went on in Israel. Let me pull the article back up so I don't miscite anything because it's rather new news. About 400 people were injured, 236 killed, a lot of them being operatives of Hamas or different jihadist groups inside Gaza that are funded by Iran. But there were a lot of civilian casualties, and I kind of figured this would be an interesting topic to bring up with you because you were in the military. Do you actually see what's going on in Israel and agree with the narrative that Israel is fighting one of the most civilian friendly wars that has ever existed from one side, or is it a civilian catastrophe, borderline genocide, as the other side is saying?
Without a doubt, genocide. Civilian catastrophe genocide. Like, I always find it interesting is the fact that every spokesperson that's gone on Piers Morgan's show, they 100% know for certain how many terrorists have killed, but they don't know how many civilians they killed. And I find that really, really hard to believe. And, it's just, when it comes down to it, I know there's going to be collateral damage, but with some of the videos that I see on X platform and on other social media sites, I see them treating the people of Palestine not as combatants, but as sport. Like, I've seen them, mocking people after they're dead or something like that. And I've seen them, telling a prisoner just to go back, and then they gun him down after he's blindfolded. And I've seen them bragging about bombing villages. It's fucking horrific, in my opinion. But I did see that situation where they rescued 4 hostages. I mean, I want all the hostages to come home. But did you hear that, the main negotiator for the families of the hostages, said that they already had an agreement from Hamas to take it to Netanyahu, and he said no?
I didn't, but I mean, Hamas has made a few agreements that any reasonable country, like there was the hostage trade, there were 33 special situation, like old people and children hostages they were going to try to get back for a 2-week ceasefire. And when Hamas got a hold of that deal, they rewrote it to include dead bodies in those hostages and gave it back to Israel. And then they're like, oh, Hamas agreed to the ceasefire, and now Israel's backing out. It's because they changed a key detail of it to say we're going to give you dead bodies instead of hostages. I think that, I'd have to look at the details of that because Hamas has been doing so the death tolls as well. It's really Israel's saying 25,000. The Gaza Health Ministry is saying around 40,000. And I think the UN numbers put it somewhere closer to around 30, and say that the preponderance, the largest group of people that have died are military-aged men, and they're saying non-combatant children that have died, it's only in the 5,000s, which is still a lot, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It's just what you hear online is it's 20,000. So it's less than what's being advertised. I just don't know. It's in the middle of the war. We don't have enough information, and we're probably not gonna for a few more years to know who's telling the truth here.
There's still a lot of bodies that they're pulling out of there, but it's just I find most interesting is the fact that everybody is really kind of quick to because I used to be very, very pro-Israel, and I support the people of Israel. I don't trust their government whatsoever. I support the people of Palestine. I despise Hamas with every rational person will tell you that the attack on October the 7th needs to be denounced. There are Muslims around the world say this was a horrible attack and never should have taken place. But now they're looking at the response by Israel and they feel like, wow, dude, you guys are saying we're only destroying legitimate targets, but I've seen some of the footage. Some of these targets did not look legitimate. They just leveled entire city blocks. It's Hamas was there, Hamas was there, Hamas was there. It's I just don't really buy into it. It's a PR nightmare. When you've got the UN, you've got every World Health Organization, you've got every medical organization. Everybody's no, that's not what's happening here. I tend to go with people that are on the ground as well. I don't go to any government website. I go to the people that are on the ground. You've got American doctors there that are saying, wow, we just had a shit ton of people get brought in, and they said, oh, they just bombed us. And there was a video, a drone footage of 10 people just gathering in a circle, and they bombed them. Nobody knew what these targets were. Now, I'm not going to say all Israelis are murderers, because I'm not going to say that whatsoever. But it's just it seems there's the shackles are off, because there's a level of bureaucracy that people in the military have to especially if you feel there's people that are in the danger zone, essentially. Say, for example, if you've got 5 terrorists, one group of 1,000 people, right? they're going to make that call. They're going to call up to like 5 or 6 different chains, and they're going to make a determination whether the ends justify the means. And sometimes if they feel like the risk is too great, they'll say, no, we'll probably catch these guys another time, but we're going to keep them under observation. I mean, this is something that anybody can find out about. But Israel just seems like the shackles are fucking off. Like, they don't give a shit. Like, if they see them, and boom, they're going to take them out, like, right there on the spot. And I always hear the story, oh, we're doing everything in our power to make sure that we don't bomb any unnecessary people. What I saw happen in Rafah definitely says otherwise. And I don't give a shit if they say it was an accident. I don't consider that an accident. That looked very deliberate.
That wasn't an accident. They actually released the footage. Where they bombed was almost a mile away from the explosion that killed 45 people. They retracted their statement that said it was an accident, and they said we had nothing to do with this. So they're not taking any at all now.
Yeah. And Ben just like, go ahead.
That being said, like I get what you're saying, and it does look bad for the civilians, but like at the same time, I feel like if any entity that ran a country attacked the United States in the same manner 20 years ago as to what Hamas was doing to Israel, the United States, China, Russia, almost any European country would have went in and wiped their government out. And that's what Israel's doing now. When I listen to people that are like hard-line right-wingers, they call Bibi kind of a moderate pussy that didn't take this problem out 20 years ago when he should have. And he's on record in their minds for never actually going in and solving the problem, but just mowing the lawn and dealing with it and being the moderators to keep his job in power and keep the country happy and not actually do what needed to be done. So there's a lot of people in Israel that think Bibi is kind of lost that hardline right-wing thing that he seemed to prop up. If you look at polling out of Israel right now, I think it's like 80%, 90% of people in Israel, even including a majority of non-Jewish, which I think there's like 2 million non-Jewish Arabs that live in Israel, they also agree majorly that there should be no two-state solution until Hamas is gone. So Israel right now, their argument, and I kind of tend to agree with it a bit, is if you are pro-Palestinian, you should be pro the removal of Hamas from their governing body and let them have another election because Hamas canceled them after 2006.
Well, I'm all for getting rid of Hamas, but the thing is, the way that Israel's carrying this out, they're not doing themselves any favors right now, because the thing is, when people say, oh, well, the people of Palestine, they just need to, if they know something about Hamas, they need to come forward. Those people have no guarantees that Israel's going to look out for their best interest, because they don't give a shit. They're, oh, thanks for the information, but we're not going to help you out, essentially. They're not going to care. And the thing is if you've got a man that just had a normal life, but his entire family just got evaporated in one bomb strike, and it was like the wrong fucking house, they're not going to want to help out Israel for shit. And they're not going to trust a word that Israel has to say. They're going to want it. It's like, some people are going to like, you know what? I just need to get the hell out of here and save my own skin. Some might be willing to actually stand up and fight. And honestly, it would be really, really hard for me to tell them that they're wrong to do that, because it's not about Hamas. It's just because they want retribution against Israel. And again, I'm not going to justify like, continuing this conflict. But it's just like, it's so hard to tell somebody, listen, okay, kind of back off a little bit, okay? There's a reason why Israel just bombed your home. You need to blame Hamas. They're not going to want to blame Hamas. They're going to, they're not going to want to, because right now they're just, their whole entire family just got blown to pieces, and you're going to tell them to blame Hamas? Hamas is then going to come forward and say, hey, listen, we tried to tell you guys, but nobody wanted to listen to us. Israel's responding, so what are you going to do now? You know what? Fuck it, I'll join you then, maybe. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but that's how some people might actually take that, essentially.
So there's going to be a lot of information coming out over the next couple of years to confirm or deny claims. Israel's claiming that most of the homes that they hit had tunnels in them leading to the tunnel system. Most of, like 80% probably, there are some caught in the blast. They're claiming that every hospital, I think they just hit, it wasn't a hospital, it was something recently, a school recently, but the school it was a Hamas base. They're claiming they have evidence of that. There was the children's hospital toward the beginning of the war. It caused massive, how could Israel bomb a children's hospital? We found out there was a giant weapons cache underneath the children's hospital that was linked to the tunnel system as well. Things like that. So with how much evidence we have from Israel thus far proving some of the claims they made in the past, and then them also owning up to their mistakes, like with that truck, the food aid it was the guy in New York City. He owned he was like a food dude. He was sending food to the Palestinians, and Israel blew him up. Mm-hmm. they admitted to that mistake immediately. They said there was an investigation. Where if you juxtapose that with the Gaza Health Ministry, there was that the IJF fired off a rocket. It was a parking lot at a hospital. The Gaza Health Ministry said that was an Israeli rocket that intentionally shot that hospital without warning and killed 500 people. 2 days later, that story was completely debunked. Those numbers are still in the Gaza Health Ministry toll. So we know that, and I think there was 3 other stories that were completely debunked. Those numbers still being in their death toll, to me, calls into question their death toll and kind of everything they say if they're that willing to stand behind a debunked lie still. So I don't know. I think Israel's putting forth a lot more effort if you look at what they're releasing to show that they're telling the truth when they speak. Not everything. There's definitely some, and I can't excuse the actions. You brought up some videos I've seen as well about troops doing awful things. You can't excuse every person in the IDF. Yeah, sure. But I feel like Israel is just not only to move into Gaza, and also the point you were saying about the no chains as well. If they didn't have the Biden administration commanding them on threatening to withhold weapons to them and this and that, I think they would have taken Rafah 3 months ago, and this would all be over and done with. Biden has been delaying the Rafah it's been about 2 months it took them to go into Rafah. They moved 1 million people in a week. Right after they said they were going in, they started the preparations, built a camp really quickly, moved 1 million people there in a week. All those people are out of harm's way, way more than Hamas did with anybody to protect their own citizens. And at the same time, I get why Biden's doing it. It's election related. He's got his left flank coming after him. But I still feel like Israel is also justified to turn around and go hit Lebanon. 1/4 of the country right now, 1/4 of Israel had to completely move out of the northern sector now for 9 months. They have not been able to go home because Lebanon has just been bombing every single day. Thousands of bombs that have happened since the war started. Israel's not supposed to go and respond to that because they aren't killing enough people. I don't know. I think they're justified to go after these attacks on their state.
I do think that they should definitely they have there is a reason for them going after Hamas, but the thing is they're just kind of going scorched earth. And I've heard the defense ministry, people from Israel, they don't even consider Palestinians real people, so they don't give a shit. They don't seem to care about the amount of damage that they're actually causing. Now, I'm sure that there are some Israeli soldiers out there that are probably very conflicted. I get that. I understand completely where they're coming from. But it's just the Israeli government, because they're not the ones that are seeing this right now. They don't give a shit. I think there's also some telling about Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to do everything in his power to stay in power, because once he's out of power, he's going to go down the shitter, because he's already trying to battle corruption charges, essentially. Shit, one of my lights just went out. He's trying to battle corruption charges that are lobbed against him. And once he's out of power, once he's out of office, he is fucked. So he is trying everything in his power to try to come out looking like the good guy. But that's a very, very tall order for him to climb, because he's pretty much screwed once he's out of office.
I thought those corruption charges, some of them anyways, were dropped a few years back. Because I remember that story coming out right before the election that he lost to the coalition government. Mm-hmm. I thought some of those were dropped because there had been no indictments to this point. And it's been about, 7 years since they were first brought up?
Apparently they were still pending, but because he's in office right now, he can't be brought up on indictment charges. Some of his elections were really shifty, because there was one time, I can't remember when it was, he was running for re-election. He was well behind on the polls, and then overnight, boom, he fucking wins. It's kind of like Ahmadinejad in Iran. Same deal with him. He was way behind in the polls, and boom, overnight, he wins the election. Something just seems really shifty around there. I don't like corrupt individuals, and I look at Benjamin Netanyahu as a very corrupt individual. And I'm not going to suggest that, he had something to do with what happened October 7th, but I feel like his government really screwed the pooch. There's a lot that they probably... There's probably not enough that they did, but when it comes down to Israel being honest, we, for the first few months, were led to believe that, there was 40 dead, beheaded babies. That turned out to not be true. But a lot of people believe that, but people aren't believing the story of the footage of, Palestinian children beheaded by the bombs, essentially. People are like, oh, no, that's just special effects. It's come on, dude. Seriously? I mean, you see the devastation. I've seen devastated eyes. I've seen, children die in front of me. It's fucking horrific. It's something you don't really forget. So it's just I just think that the reason why a lot of people don't care about the Palestinians is it's because, like, and I hate to sound like really like, not SJW, but it's just like we don't seem to really care about countries like these. It's because people tend to think all Muslims are evil, or they just kind of like, oh, well, we don't care about those people. We have nothing to gain from them. Because, like, we see war crimes from other countries happen all the time, like blockades. But, like, Saudi Arabia, they're doing blockades against the Yemenis people. But we don't seem to give a shit because we are partners with Saudi. So we'll condone certain war crimes from our partners. It's kind of fucked up. Sorry.
Honestly, Biden ended that when he first got into office. He turned Saudi Arabia into a pariah. That's like one of the arguments to make about Biden's presidency is he spent a lot of his year 3 and 4 cleaning up most of the messes that he made in his year 1. And one of those was to turn Saudi Arabia into a pariah, go after gas and oil in a bunch of different ways, his administration as well as Democrats, House hearings, grilling the leaders of big oil and whatnot. Trying to get him to switch over to more climate-friendly alternatives faster and things like that. I feel like that pariahship to Saudi Arabia is what made OPEC turn against him and what made gas prices somewhat go up to punish him. And he had to end up going back to Saudi Arabia, hat in hands, completely forgetting about Khashoggi and all the reasons he wanted to turn them into pariah.
Yep.
With the Yemen thing, he ended the Yemen any funding and weapons trade to the Saudis that had to do with Yemen. On top of that, he took the Houthis off the terror watch list, and now we see the Houthis are firing rockets at not just Israel but international trade lanes. They're shooting rockets at like international barges to obstruct world trade on behalf of I guess the Iranian terror coalition in the Middle East, I guess is a good way to call it, because they're all funded by that. But I don't know, I feel like that in a sense Iran was coddled to by the Obama administration with the JCPOA to a large degree. And it does fit into left-wing foreign policy desires. Left-wing foreign policy wants two balanced powers to balance each other out. Right-wing foreign policy is basically American hegemony. We're the good guys, you're the bad guys, listen to us. So I get why the Obama administration wanted to bolster Iran to a higher state in order to create a kind of conflict with Israel. I understand that. But when Biden came into office, there were all sorts of other circumstances, like Iran's closest enemy, Russia, was about to invade Ukraine, so we shouldn't give Iran a bunch of money and help them out with sanctions and kind of, give Russia a couple winks and nods on a pipeline and this and that. A lot of these policies that just to kind of oppose what Trump did sort of shot Biden in the foot. And I feel like in the Houthis in Yemen is a big one that is a go-to. He took them off the terror watch list and coddled them, and now they're doing literal terrorist actions, proving that they were legal, or they were justifiably so to be on that list. So I don't know. He's been great in the third and fourth year. I'm not trying to knock on Biden here too much. In the third and fourth year, his administration's been pretty damn good. I just think his first year policy is just kind of sucked.
I have to kind of push back on the JCPOA because, like, when Obama did that Iran nuclear deal, they're actually still abiding by it. They are actually very heavily regulated, and like they had inspectors, they were cooperating the whole time with the inspectors coming in. When Trump pulled us out of that, they said, fuck you, we're going to do whatever the hell we want to now. Now they've been, like, they're closer to, like, enriching uranium to, like, a point to now. I'm not saying that they've actually found, but they pulling us out of there actually did more harm than it did good. And when people say, oh, the pallets of cash sent to Iran, that was actually their money. It wasn't paid for by tax dollars, essentially. And all this money that Iran gets, basically, it's very heavily regulated. And there's a third party that kind of oversees transactions like that. But there's a lot of people that just don't understand how complicated of an issue it is. And, people are blaming Biden for what happened between Israel and Palestine, or they're saying, oh, money is fungible, therefore it's like, listen, some of y'all just use the word fungible because it sounds like a fancy word. You have no fucking idea how complicated these things like this are. I mean, there are some geopolitical experts that I reach out to, and they're like my go-to because they can give me an honest assessment of these things, but it's just...
Keep in mind that the Qatari government is also the same people that are harboring the leaders of Hamas in their country, giving them safe passage. If they're going to harbor one of Iranian's proxy group's leaders, I don't know if I necessarily trust them to have that $5 billion or $6 billion. And it's sanctioned money. Yeah, it's money we withheld from sanctions. And Trump did give them that $10 billion when he was in office as well. But recently just gave him $10 billion like 6 months ago, which is going to help continue fuel the war against Israel. So, but yeah, no, I'm looking something up here because I remember this. Trump was saying when he pulled out of the JCPOA that Iran had already violated it several times, and I'm looking online. Iran's missile program in 2016 was seen to be a violation of the spirit of the agreement, as well as their nuclear program was on the precipice of violating. And they found out once Trump left the JCPOA, the rate of which Iran went from their centrifuge production to where they are now was like to the point where it was like all they had to do was bring in equipment they already had running, working, going. So they basically were breaking the deal in secret already in terms of their centrifuge production.
I'd have to look
well,
at.
Yes.
You'll have to send me the link because I can't look stuff up while I'm talking to people because then I'm not going to listen to a word you're saying. I got auditory processing. I can only do so many things at once. So
I do it for work, so I'm actually really good at like listening while
I can't.
It's a work thing. It's
No, I got you. No, there's like it's kind of like that thing. Like if I'm talking to you and somebody calls me on the phone, I can only focus on one conversation. It's just it drives me fucking nuts. Yeah, I'll have to look that up. Yeah, just send me that link whenever you get a chance. So, but
Absolutely.
yeah, but it's just I really feel it's important for us to focus on like what's it called like Qatar. Yes, Qatar is like. They are like our third party, and yes, I know that because like Qatar also funds Hamas. They like the Turkey also funds Hamas. There's a lot of countries that fund Hamas, but some of them are our very allies. It's fucked up like a football bat, like I keep on saying. It's just geopolitics is such a messy world because like when I talk to one of my good buddies, I say, so how is life treating you? He's like, dude, the world's on fire, but what else is new, right? Because like that's essentially what it is. And there's a lot that people don't understand. Like there's geopolitics in some parts of the world that people just have no fucking clue about, and it's kind of scary at times. It's like Jesus.
It kind of begs the question for NATO too. Like, should there be a better, more expedited removal process? Because when Erdogan came in, he kind of shifted the country's politics, and now he is more of an ally of the people NATO opposes than he is with NATO. And maybe there should have been some punishment on Germany for Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 bringing in oil from Russia. Like, you're supposed to be a group banded together against this adversary, and you're over here giving them the biggest economic boost they've seen in 20 years so you can get cheap oil. Like, it doesn't, I don't know.
No.
I feel like NATO shot itself in the foot, and like, Trump went a little overboard, but there were some corrections that maybe needed to happen in terms of taking NATO more seriously again. I don't think Trump was the one that fixed it. I think Russia invading Ukraine was the catalyst to spike that. But
Sure.
still, like, Trump definitely diagnosed the problem properly. Just the same way that Bernie Sanders diagnosed problems properly, but maybe didn't have the best solution for him.
Yeah, he got shot out like in the like past two elections. So there was like. Which kind of sucks. I mean, there's a lot of people like Bernie, but you bring up an interesting point about like Turkey, because Turkey is one of our allies. We also had allies in Syria, the Kurds, and we pretty much said fuck, bye. We just kind of left them to get slaughtered. And it's kind of fucked up. But like when people are talking about like oil, Russian oil, people think that like we've never imported Russian oil. We do. And ever since the war started, gas prices have gone up because we no longer, I don't think we import Russian oil anymore. So that's one of the reasons. And like, that's why people need to understand is like, if another conflict happens, like say in another Middle Eastern country, let's say, for example, a war happens in Saudi Arabia, gas prices are going to spike even higher. Even though we are the world's net exporter of oil, we still have to import oil from other countries. Like, that's why oil is a global commodity. And people don't understand that. They just think, oh, we can pump our own oil. We don't always use the same oil products that we make in this country. Other kinds of oil come from other parts of the world, essentially. But we're still the net exporter.
That's what I was saying earlier with OPEC. Biden he spent his first year making Saudi Arabia into a pariah and damning OPEC and going after big oil and saying this is in 10 years we're going to phase oil out of our country. To 2 years later, he went over hat in hand begging OPEC to open up their drilling, open up their production, and start pumping out more oil to help the United States because we're no longer buying Russian oil. And they did to a degree, but they also kind of told us to F off. So like in a way, like we kind of sullied that. And the price of oil started to skyrocket long before we stopped buying Russian oil. On top of that, though, there are some good news highlights that came out of that. Prior to the war, Russia was the number one supplier of energy to the UK. Now it's the United States that recently surpassed them. I think about 3-4 They're still number 2, but the United States was like number 4, and they jettisoned all the way up to number 1, taking a large percent of the Europeans' energy production. So that's good for us. Natural gas is much cheaper, much easier to use, and much cleaner than using crude oil. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, was there anything else you wanted to discuss before we wrap this thing up?
no, I'm just chilling. I had a good time. I just want political friends, man. People that like this shit as much as I do, that can disagree with me and tell me I'm wrong and I'm right. This is great. I'd do this anytime you need me.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is why I like having conversations like this. It's just like, it's fine if we disagree on certain topics, but I think it's good to kind of like keep a level head. That it kind of like shows that, hey, we can disagree, but still have good faith. But I like having conversations like this. This is why I try to bring on different guests, because I like other people's points of view, because I used to do the show by myself, and I realized how fucking boring I am. I'm a boring person, like, when I do it by myself. So I like to bring in somebody else to bring in a topic and give me their point of view on it. I think it's such a healthy way to kind of go about it. So, but yeah, I'm glad you had a good time, though.
Absolutely. This is what I made this for, man. Like, my fiance, my fucking brother, sister, mom, dad, friends, they don't want to talk about politics like this. And I just be yapping in their ears. So now I get to come on people's shows. They get to kind of chat with me, do debates, and it's all like-minded individuals. I found a hobby that's pretty awesome.
Fantastic. So, what kind of content are you going to do in the future? I know you said you want to talk about like housing, you want to talk about things like that. Are you going to like host panels, host debates, or something like that? Is that what you plan on doing?
So I want to get this big panel together. It's going to be, I got me, a political science professor. I want to get somebody that's written some sort of housing policy in the past, or policy in general, kind of for what you were saying with all the caveats and the footnotes, and talking about other branching into other policy and maybe taking money from X and Y because you're making them less effective with this policy. And I want to write this right-wing policy idea I have that would be affordable housing, but it would be for first-time homeowners. It would be a low to no profit government loan that would be structured in a way that would move people out of the cities, making the cost of living go down in those cities, so you wouldn't need as much rental assistance or mortgage assistance in a highly dense area because of the cost of living effects that would happen. Things like that. And I made a video on it, but the production quality is awful. It's an hour long of me rambling on the topic, and I just want to get some experts in there to kind of turn this into something that could be like a rough draft of a policy that maybe I could sit down and type into something tangible, lobby somebody to try one day, and that would be a really cool goal, I feel like. Plus, I'm making a series right now. I got a bunch of scripts written for like immigration. Here's what Trump actually believes, because I hear people say like he's anti-illegal immigrant, which is very far from the truth in terms of like what his actual immigration policy was. And then I hear like Biden is like pro illegal immigrant and just wants to open up the borders. That's very untrue based on his past history on the border, especially, but also what his administration's trying to do. They just didn't want to do Trump's policies. They wanted to do something different, but they want the same end result. And I want to make those videos so people can actually know what policies they're voting for and not just listen to internet hyperbole.
No, 100%. That's good. So you're going to talk about like doing like video documentaries or video shorts or video miniseries and stuff like that?
Probably half an hour videos per topic, 10 minutes to Trump, 10 minutes to Biden, and 10 minutes of debunking talking points.
Interesting. Well, I'll go and subscribe to your channel, and I'll just like anytime you drop some new content, just, you know where to find me. So
it's going to be, I just got my recording equipment ordered. It probably should be here Wednesday. I think I have a WIC panel on Friday, and then after that, I'm going to start probably pumping these out. I hired an editor. I got money. I just don't have the time and patience to be doing all that shit, so I'd rather just pay someone else.
Gotcha. All right, man. Well, hey, Tyler, I appreciate your time, and I'm glad that you came on this platform. And hopefully you and I can like interact on other panels, or other, if you ever want to build it up and you want to bring me on your platform, you know where to find me.
Absolutely. Yeah, dude, whenever I get the ball rolling in terms of like these policy discussions, if you ever think of something original and want to throw it in the ether, hell yeah, I'd love to have a conversation about that. Just theory, craft, policy.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody that was able to tune in tonight, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the weekend, and y'all take care now. See ya.
Nope, take her easy.
Yep.
Yeah, so the issue I was talking about, the real thing that separates me from the Democratic Party is I don't believe in gender theory.